This is Chapter 3, Conquest in the Americas, discussion number 1, Christopher Columbus. The last chapter dealt with the Europeans going east with the lead of Portugal. This chapter is going to be Europe's interaction after they go west. Now, we did mention it briefly in the last chapter, but in this chapter we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about Columbus and his effect on the New World and with his explorations of Spain. Now, he was an Italian, but he convinced the Queen of Spain, Isabella, to sponsor his voyage to find a better route to the Far East. Now, Isabella had just married Ferdinand of Aragon, and it was their two kingdoms that when they married, it became Spain. They actually were married in 1491, which you also know that in 1492 is when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So just the next year, probably still on the honeymoon, or they're still called newlyweds at least. Columbus actually did make 4 trips to the New World. Now, once they got there and got back, and Columbus said, gee, I think we found someplace else, Spanish started going to the New World, finding as many different things as they could. Mainly because it was the promise of more land and new items in order to get very rich on. Now, the Spanish explorers, which were called conquistadors, were considered themselves to be superior to the natives simply because they knew about Christ and the natives didn't. And they'd understood what Christian symbols were, like a cross. The natives were like, well, what's going on with this? But the Spanish said, well, they're obviously dumb barbarians and need to be subjected to us superior European Christians. Often they would take back captives and show them off to the royalties and say that, and essentially to demonstrate that they were superior in all ways, shapes, and forms. When they got there, they also tried to take all their gold, all their silver, all their precious metals, and then, okay, everyone's going to have to be Christian. And we've found through history that when conquerors go around trying to force people to be Christian or any other religion, it doesn't work very well. But the Spanish tried in the name of spreading Christianity and having everyone learn how to be a Christian. There's a story about Europeans trying to force the Native Americans to worship Christ. And what they had done is they had set up this cross in the village. And they said that, no, all of you have to be proper Christians, and you will worship and you will pray in front of this big post that's got a crossbeam on it. And you will pray to Christ. And the Native Americans were like, what in the world are you talking about? However, these people had guns, they'd killed a lot of people, and so they were going to obey what they were being told to do. However, what had happened, and that was later discovered, especially with some archaeological digs, is that the Native Americans at night had snuck back near the cross, and they had buried a lot of their pagan idols that they had been worshiping before the Europeans got there. So the next morning, and when the Europeans would say, okay, it's time to go worship God, the Native Americans would go and they'd dutifully bow down and they'd quote unquote pray, but little did the Europeans know they were praying to the gods that they had snuck in at night. However, one of the big effects of the Spaniards and all Europeans ending up into the New World is remember that this large land mass that we now call North America and South America had not been exposed to the same diseases that the Europeans had on the Eurasian continent and even into Africa some. And so they had built up an immunity to smallpox, so that, yeah, smallpox was deadly to some, but some people lived through it. Chicken pox, even the simple flu. Uh, when the Europeans brought them and brought these little bugs and viruses in their bloodstream and shared them, rather innocently with the Native Americans, they had no immunity to it, and it devastated the population. Some people estimate millions died on the North American continent within 15 to 20 years of the Europeans showing up, simply because they did not have the immunity to deal with those diseases. This concludes discussion number 1, Christopher Columbus.